For topic two, we're going to talk about loan amortization. Okay, so there's something called a loan amortization schedule. So anytime you have like one of these big installment loans, you could potentially have, I don't know that they necessarily present it to you anymore, but once upon a time they would present to you a loan amortization schedule. And it was basically a schedule of each payment that was made on the loan and how much of that payment went to interest and how much of that payment went to actually paying down the principal or the loan amount. Okay. So, a very easy thing to calculate, like none of the calculations are hard, like it's multiplication and subtraction, really, but you got to understand kind of like what each step is doing. Okay. So, let's look at loan amortization. So, an amortization schedule is a schedule of payments that show how much of each regular payment will go towards interest and how much will go towards principal. Okay. So, one of the things that we've noticed with the mortgages and with the cars, but more so with the mortgages, is just how much interest you pay. Okay. So, when you see the amortization schedule, you'll see why this can be so much money because at the kind of the initial points and like the start of the loan, when you look at each payment, much more of that payment is going to interest than it is to principal. But then at some point it flip-flops, and then more of the payment is going to principal than interest, especially towards the very end. Most of your payment's going to go to paying off the actual loan amount. So it's kind of a process. It's tedious for sure. Okay, calculator or not calculator, but like computer programs would for sure do this, where you just type in some information and it's going to go and just figure it out for you. But there is some power into understanding how it is calculated so you can really understand that, when you have this payment that you make to the bank, a lot of it goes to the bank, and then a little tiny bit goes towards paying off the loan. And then the next payment, a little tiny bit less goes to the bank, but still a whole bunch. And then a little tiny bit more goes to paying off the loan. Okay. So again, there's power in understanding how this works. Okay, so formulas. There are basically three formulas that we're going to calculate. Okay, assuming we already know the mortgage payment, the loan amount, the interest rate. Okay, you kind of have to know that stuff going into an amortization schedule. You also need to know how many years are on the loan. Okay, so there's some stuff that you just kind of have to know. But once you know that, there's three formulas that we then have to use to calculate the different components of this amortization schedule. The first thing we have to calculate is the interest for just a single month. Okay. So for each monthly payment, that payment gets split into two chunks. One chunk goes to interest, one chunk goes to principal. How do we calculate that? Well, we calculate the interest for the month, and this goes back to simple interest. Okay, so we haven't talked about simple interest in a minute. Okay, so simple interest was 8.3. So remember, for simple interest, we had that I was equal to PRT. I for interest, P for principal, R for interest rate, and T for time. So when we're talking about these components here, principal is going to be changing. So principal is always going to really just be the balance on the loan. Okay, so for each payment that we look at, the principal amount is going to change. This is going to be the balance on the loan. R is still just going to be the interest rate, okay? So whatever your interest rate is for the loan, that's what it's going to be for this little payment or this little calculation we look for to find the interest for just a single month, okay? And then T is interesting. We're looking for the interest for a single month. Okay. And remember, when we talked about just simple interest, we had PRT. T was always time in years, but if you were looking at just a month or 3 months or 6 months, you had to write your months in terms of a year. If we're looking at just 1 month equals 1/12 of a year. So we're always going to let T equal 1/12 when we're calculating the interest for a single month, okay? So that's the first thing we have to do. We have to figure out the interest for a single month. And then what we have to do is once we know the interest paid in a single month, we have to take the monthly payment and subtract that interest payment, and that'll tell us how much goes to principal. Okay, so then we find the principal payment for the month. And then what we have to do is calculate the new balance on the loan. Well, the new balance of the loan is going to be the original principal minus the principal payment. And that's going to be the new principal, the new balance on the loan. Okay. So it's kind of like this rotating thing that's going to happen. Okay. And I think it'll probably make more sense when you see it in practice. Okay. So let's go through an example here. Okay. Example 3 says prepare a loan amortization schedule for the first 3 months of the mortgage below. Round entries to the nearest cent. Okay. So we're going to round mathematically always 2 decimal places. So for this particular mortgage, we have an interest rate of 7%. We have a loan amount of 325,000. We have a payment. So the actual monthly payment is 2,000. It's $2,162, and then the terms on the loan, it's a 30-year loan. Okay. So we have 3 payments, payment 1, payment 2, payment 3. The first thing we have to do is calculate the interest for month 1. Okay. So for month 1, we take the balance of the loan, which is the actual loan amount to start with. Okay. So we have to calculate the interest, which is going to be 325,000 times the interest rate of 7%, and then times 1 month. So 1/12 of a year. And we'll just do this on the regular calculator instead of switching screens. So 325,000 times 0.07 times, in parentheses, you can just do 1 divided by 12, and that'll do the 1/12. And that gives us 1,895.83 repeating. So I would say the interest for the first month is $1,895.83 when we round. Okay. Now we know how much interest we paid in month 1. Let's figure out how much principal was paid in month 1. So the very first payment of your loan. So to figure out the principal, we take the monthly payment and we subtract the interest that we just found in this first little box, okay? So the payment was $2,162. We want to subtract the interest payment. So $1,895.83. Whatever is left over goes towards the actual balance of the loan. So 2,162 minus $1,895.83, and we get $266.17. And this should kind of make you want to barf a little bit, because for that very first payment that this person would have made to the bank, of that $2,162, $1,895.83 went to the bank. Only $266.17 went towards actually paying down your loan. Now, what I really need you all to understand here is if we take these two highlighted values in yellow and add them up, we get the, whoops. If we take these two values that are highlighted and add them, we get the amount of the payment. So we're just taking that $2,162 and we're splitting it into two buckets of money. One bucket, the interest, goes to the bank. The other bucket goes to paying down your loan. So what is the new balance on your loan? Well, you take the previous balance, okay? So the previous balance was $325,000. That's how much we started out borrowing. And we want to subtract the principal payment for month 1. The principal payment for month 1 was $266.17. So this means the new balance on the loan is going to be $325,000 minus $266.17. So, whoops. So the new balance on the loan is $324,733.83. And if that isn't enough to make you cry, I don't know. You're tough as nails, okay? So again, you just paid $2,162, and of that $2,162, only $266.17 went to actually paying down your mortgage. Okay? And then we lather, rinse, repeat. But when we do the interest payment, we always use this value. So we always use the next balance on the loan. Okay. So for payment 2, this is month 2, the interest calculation is going to be the balance on the loan. So $324,733.83 times 7% times 1/12. So $324,733.83 times 0.07 times, in parentheses, 1 divided by 12. And for month 2, $1,894.28 goes to the bank. let's figure out how much actually goes towards the balance of our loan. So we take the payment, all right, which is $2,162. We subtract the interest payment for this month, which is $1,894.28. And whatever's left over goes to actually paying down our loan. So let's see, 2,162 minus $1,894.28. So this month, a whopping $267.72 goes to actually paying down our loan. Okay, it takes a long time to pay off a mortgage. At the beginning, most of your payment just goes to the bank. Okay, so let's see what the new balance on our loan would be. Well, it would be $324,733.83 minus $267.72. So after two payments, we still owe 324,733.83 minus 267.72. We still owe $324,466.11. Okay. So let's do this one more time. Okay. Now for month 3, when we go to calculate the interest, remember in the interest formula, PRT, P is going to change. It's always going to be the latest balance on your loan. So for month 3, we get I equals $324,466.11 times 0.07 times 1/12. And that's going to tell us how much goes to the bank for interest that month. So let's see, 324,466.11 times 0.07 times 1/12. And this month, $1,892.72 goes to the bank. And let's figure out how much actually goes to pay off our loan. So we would take the regular payment of $2,162, subtract $1,892.72. Whatever is left over goes to actually paying down our mortgage. So 2162 minus 1892.72. So this month, $269.28 goes to the actual balance of our loan. So to figure out the latest balance, we take the previous balance, $324,466.11, and we subtract the principal payment, which is $269.28, and whatever is left over is what we still owe on our loan. So 324,466.11 minus 269.28. We still owe, after 3 months, $324,196 and an exhausting 83 cents. Okay, so let's just see how much we actually paid versus how much we paid down our loan. Okay, so our payment is $2,162, and for 3 months, that ended up being $6,486. So $2,162 times 3 was $6,486. So that's how much we actually paid out for 3 months. Okay, but how much did we actually reduce our mortgage by? Well, I could take what we started with, 325,000. I could subtract the latest balance, which is $324,196.83. And it's going to be nauseating. So even though out of pocket we've paid $6,486 in the course of 3 months, only $803.17 actually went towards our mortgage. Okay, so this is a bummer. Okay, we hate this, but this is just the reality. If you don't have the money in cash and you don't have a big down payment and you have to borrow, this is the cost of borrowing. It is interest. Okay, so if you do get to the point where you get a mortgage, if you have an interest rate like 7% and the interest rates drop, it may be financially benefit to suck up the cost now to pay to refinance your loan, because you could potentially refinance your loan, get a much lower interest rate that'll save you thousands and thousands and thousands over the course of time. Don't forget the trick about saving up a month, saving up one full payment for the year and then making one lump sum payment to principal. That's supposed to knock some serious time off your loan. But unfortunately, when you make these payments, most of it goes to interest and then a little bit goes to principal. And then eventually, at some point, years and years into your loan, things flip-flop and more of it starts going to principal than to interest, but it takes time. Okay. So that is a loan amortization schedule. Again, it just tells you for your monthly payment how much of that monthly payment goes to the bank for interest and how much goes towards actually paying down your loan. Okay. So in the next, I think we've only got one more video left. We're going to talk about some kind of like general rules of thumb for how much you can afford. And then we'll talk about some pros and cons for renting and owning. Okay.